like to thank the Architectural League for the invitation. I'm going to ask you a favor. If I start speaking too low, please signal that to me, because I'm pretty good at lowering my voice, and so you won't be able to hear me. In trying to figure out what we were going to talk about tonight, or what I was going to talk about tonight, I have to clear out that I'm just going to talk about the work done in Dellekamp Arquitectos. That's the design firm that I'm the principal in. And we very quickly saw that more than half of our work is residential in the last 8 years. And the reason for this is very clear. When I started my office, the timing was really great because there was this boom or bubble for housing, which is almost a particular phenomenon to talk about today, because we can almost say that it's what has brought a disaster in the economy. But anyway, we got a slice of this pie. And the other thing that we learned by doing this first selection was that we had been able to work in many different scales of housing, and as well in many different budgets. So what we found particular about this selection is that we had gone from social housing, on the one hand, from the very minimum unit up there, that's only a 35 square meter unit, to a villa in China. It's 1,000 square meters. And in between, we had been able to develop projects for all types of different clients. And this, to us, has been like a thread that kind of puts together a lot of interests that have been present in our work. The first project I'm going to show is social housing. And I have to say that this is a project that is really, really important to the office, because it's something that we had been willing to do for a very long time. And social housing in Mexico, these are just a few hard facts to frame the importance of this commission. Social housing in Mexico is barely, or I can almost say it's almost never done by architects. It's a system that is monopolized by developers, and that has nothing to do not only with architects, but with any other kind of specialists. So up to now, there's a deficit of, I think it's 5 million houses in Mexico City, of people that have already credit to buy their houses, but that there are not enough houses out in the market. Out of these 5 million houses, just last year, there were 600,000 made. So that's a lot of housing, and done with very little regulation. And the other interesting fact, I think, is that we found out that 40% of these houses were being done by only 4 or 5 major developers. So in a way, you could almost call that this is really monopolized. And the thing is that this is getting worse every time, because these 4 companies, and on the other hand, are very related to each other. So out of these 5 or 6 companies, there are actually 2 or 3 people that are in charge of all this money and that are taking these decisions. This is like a brief diagram of how social housing works in Mexico. You have the patron. This is a word I think we understand in English, the boss. And so the boss is going to pay the worker his salary, and he's only going to pay him 95% of his salary, and the other 5% he's going to keep to this institution called Infonavit. And Infonavit is going to keep the money of the worker all through the years, until eventually he has enough money, and then he can go out to the market to look for a home. So here's where he finds these guys who take the decisions for him. This is just a brief image of what these houses look like, and there are only 9 images of floor plans. But what's incredible is that if you investigate this, these are, it's like a footprint that's being repeated every single time. So there's really no options for these housing. And the things that are interesting about these houses when you start to look at them is that they are done with this idea that the car is central for in terms of standard or cultural standards. And so the lots are very, very small, but still always insist in having the car inside the lot and having the car in front of the house. So this is a disaster because you always have, what could be free space and what could be the space for you to look out and to enjoy of a free area or a ground level area is always taken by the car. Other than that, the floor plans are a disaster because they're designed by engineers or they're designed by people who are just money driven. This is what social housing looks like in Mexico. What's interesting is that, for example, these 3 houses right here, these 3 projects, are done in states that have extremely different climate conditions, and still they're the same. And then the other thing is just pretty much makeup, what they do. Another interesting thing is that it's very aspirational, and the model taken for this aspiration is the American suburb. So I think that's a funny fact. And it's a fact that nobody's really questioning, so that makes it very tough. This is an image I love. It's not a rendering. It's an actual image taken from a helicopter. And I could easily say that this is a virus. Like I said, last year 100,000 houses like these were built in Mexico. So it's pretty much a dead end, and architects don't get an opportunity for this kind of architecture because it is pretty much stuck with the system. And so the first thing you need is a good client. And we were fortunate enough to find this family. It's a business family. And in the first meeting, they told us that they were willing to do progressive social housing. And progressive is a word that is usually never linked to this kind of work. The site for this project is in Oaxaca. Oaxaca is a state that has a really warm climate. It's very beautiful in terms of the topography and the landscape. And this is a quick collage of a look and feel of Oaxaca City. Oaxaca City is one of the major touristic targets in Mexico. And one of the really main characteristics of it is color. It's really, really full of color. It is almost like, in a way, it's like complexity and contradiction because any color is possible. They mix all kinds of color and then it becomes like a really tolerant system where when you have so many colors, they just start to blend in a really good way. The project has the difficulty or the problem that other projects like this have, and that is that the land inside the cities is too expensive for this kind of development. So these developments always end up being maybe 25, 30, 40, 50 kilometers away from the main city. So this is a problem and it's not ideal, but you still have to work within these conditions. So for these people to go from Oaxaca City, where they, for sure they will work, to this lot, they have to take public transport because most of them don't have cars, which is an irony because, like I explained before, usually their houses are designed for the car to be like the protagonist. So they usually use this kind of transportation to go, and then once they're in there to go to with shorter distance, they use this motorbikes. This is the site, and this is what the competition is doing, or our neighbors are doing right now. And this is a development of almost 2,000 houses, which is being constructed right now. If you look at it from an urbanization point of view, this is our site, but these are like urban spots, and they're totally unarticulate and disorganized. There's really no planning for this. This is the 2,000 houses that are the competition or our neighbor is building right now. And these are our 3 lots. So the first part of the project was this. It's una hectárea, where we're developing only 100 houses because the urbanization was already done and there was nothing we could do about it. They asked us to keep it and that we would have the opportunity to do the development of urbanization on the other 2 lots. So for this lot, we only designed like the model of a house, which I'm going to show shortly. And this, kind of making a diagnosis of the place, this is one of the first things that we came up with. And this is like the system of roads. And the system of roads it's almost hilarious because it's like designing in the Wild West. When you start to understand it, you find out quickly that the roads don't go anywhere, and there's no connections planned for the roads. So this was a major concern from the very beginning. We knew that whatever we designed, we had to try to guess and try to propose a system that could later on allow for this to grow in a more organized way. And this might, from your context, it might sound unbelievable, but there are no plans for these areas. And if you were to try to negotiate with the government for there to be a plan, then you would be doing nothing, because that would just take years in terms of bureaucratic. This is a system of services that there are in the area. Again, they're totally unarticulate or unorganized. And this is kind of what we are doing right now. So these are the roads again. And the first thing that we did is put the roads on the corners in order for them to be able to connect themselves later on with further developments. And the areas that our neighbor is working on right now in terms of services. And so we placed the services in the places that we thought were better to articulate the urban program. And this is like the mass urban plan in terms of the houses we're building. So overall, we're building 1,500 houses with 2 different models. This is a model for the urbanization we were able to plan. And so the first thing we did is questioning like the regular floor plan that I showed you earlier on, was to design in a perpendicular way from the street. And we immediately found that this gave us a few advantages. And one is that if we did this, we had shadow from our own house protecting the void or the garden. And shadow is a major thing you need to achieve in this kind of climate. And the other thing was that we're working perpendicular from the street. We also allowed to have private views, because in the other cases the views are always heading towards the street, and the streets are always very, very ugly because they're done with no money and no planning. From there, we took this perpendicular model, and we also learned that from fragmenting it more, we had 2 other advantages. And one was that we created even more shadow, and the other one was that we created cross ventilations, which were also fundamental for this kind of climate. So this is the system, or this is what the system came out to be. And so we have 5 different models, where you start with this model, perpendicular to the street, and then you start fragmenting or pulling down or up these different areas from the basic units of the program, like bedroom, kitchen, living room, etc. This house, I should say, that is 35 square meters, I'll start doing this in meters, is going to be $15,000. That's the price that it will be sold for. So this is the basic unit, and this is where you start. And from there, you start developing your next floor in the first stage, or the whole second floor on the second stage. And that's the same case for all of these models. And always with systematic things, and I should say that this is always a concern for the office. We all were very obsessed with finding a system for all the things that we do. So once you figure out a system like this, it becomes really interesting in terms of all the patterns that you can find. So these are just combinations of the houses and how they play together in an urban way, or how they play together just simply like creating different opportunities in terms of void and construction area. The second step after this was that we made combinations where you had 1.5 lots, or you had 2 lots, or you even had 2 houses in like fusing, like when you fuse a lot with another one. So you maximize the area of lot and you have even a higher density. These are the different patterns that you have, the green areas. And so the idea will be that we will place some of these patterns on the different blocks, that eventually they will start to grow and they will start to become, they will start to grow randomly, and they will take it from there. No? The planning will be finished from us, so we only place a system to make it able for them to keep on growing. These are just random images of what the system would allow you. The budgets are so incredibly low that there is absolutely no detailing. For example, the window is only one for 1,500 houses, and the window will turn into a door, but that's it. There's no more detailing, no more opportunities in terms of ingredients to solve the problem. Kind of what happens with the corners. And I should have said before that for this, in this case, we definitely left the cars. We made something that in Spanish is called, or in English the translation would be like we're centralizing cars. And then you have to walk at the most 30 to 40 meters, so it's very rational. And you go into these inner streets that at the same time have these like canals. There's another problem is floods there, so what we're doing is we're kind of conducing the water in order to have green all over the year, because there's a lot of water. It rains for a month and a half, and it rains very, very strongly, but then the rest of the year it's very dry. This is the house we designed for the first lot, or the first plot. And so in this case, we were not able, unfortunately, we were not able to design a system. So this is simply a house to be put in this lot that has, nonetheless, it has like a plan for you to grow. So it goes from 70 square meters to 120 square meters. And this project, as well as the other, is very inspired in terms of patios. And patios, not only from a historical or melancholic point of view, because patio is without any doubt like the best way to go about the climate, or the extreme climate. For this house, we have already built 2 prototypes, and the rest of the houses have been started to build. And this just shows you the construction system, which is really uninteresting. And the only thing to say here is that since the hand labor is so extremely cheap, then that's the way to go. It's still masonry, like you would have done in antique times. And the other thing that was definitely on our mind and that we thought was a really fantastic resource was color, like I showed you on the slide of what Oaxaca looks like. So this is a house, and this is a palette of colors that we will have. So these houses will be repeatedly randomly with all these different colors. These are the prototype that have already been finished or being finished right now. And this is what the neighborhood will look like eventually. These houses are $30,000 for sale. That will be the price. They all evolve, like I said, around the central patio. Same case, in this case we were able to design with 2 windows instead of only 1. It was fun to us because in this case we were able to design a park and other things that we usually don't get the opportunity to get our hands in. And the other thing that we were really lucky about is that for this project we were able to work in many of these issues that are usually left out of this kind of commissions in terms of sustainability. So we could come up with really interesting solutions in terms of the materials, the bioclimatical strategy, and all those kind of things.